Hi everyone, my name is Jodiames and I am sending in this video to apply to be a Redken artist. And one of the requirements of this is for me to talk about why do I want to be a part of it. The way I look at that is you asking me, why do I want to be a Redken artist? Why do I want to do this and put myself through this audition? I would say the main reason is really Redken as a company is the reason that I've had the passion that I have for this industry. I started using Redken about 12 years ago, started using the color line, and then went from there into the hair care and styling. And as I was starting to use it, I obviously knew I needed some education on things, and as I started to venture out and find Redken education, I started to really see that it was different than anything I'd experienced before. And I'd been doing hair for about 8 years at that point. So yeah, that means I started when I was 5. If you do the math, you know, you got to figure that out. But so as I figured out that there was something out there that was going to, you know, support me as a stylist, a company that supports the individual stylist, the company that supports the independent salons, then from there it's just been an amazing journey of growth for me as an individual, for me as a stylist, for me as a salon owner in our company. So I really see all of those things and what I have gained from it and continue to gain from it, and I know will continue to gain from it. And I want to be a part of that and giving it back so that someone else, hopefully I could be the person that, you know, was the first class that they took and they realized it was different. They realized that someone was really there to support them and give them tools that they need for behind the chair that they use regularly, if not daily. So that's really the reason I want to do it. I've grown up with not a sad childhood by any means, but not a lot of understanding or knowledge of what was possible for me. Not just obviously in this industry, but as a person, the growth that I could have. I really grew up just thinking that what my family had was kind of going to be what I had, and I was excited to see that there was a different path for me that I could take if I chose to. And so, you know, when I go to things and I go to a class in New York City at the Redken Exchange, and I always am pinching myself about the fact that I'm there to do this and this wonderful, to learn about this wonderful industry even more, but to be in New York City or to be in Las Vegas or even to go to Dallas, I mean, doesn't seem like a big deal coming from Oklahoma, but it's still so much fun and it's so much eye-opening experience to get to, you know, collaborate and talk with other people from other areas and find out what's working for them and what they're doing behind the chair, what they're doing with their salons as business owners. So that's another reason that I really want to pass this on so that I can hopefully inspire or just open someone else's eyes to what this industry can do for them, what this company, Redken, can do for them. So I'm going to get started now, walking you over to where I will do my technique demonstration. I thought the lighting was better in that massage room for your first impression. Super close up. So first we'll stop here, my flip chart, and get it where you can read it. So calling this a braided waffle, and I did make up that name, but I did not make up this technique. It was taught to me by the wonderful Leah Freeman. She came in our salon for a class, so that's where I learned it. And I use this technique to create soft transition of color in ombres. So just in case you're wondering, that's a waffle. And there's my cloud to represent softness. So I'm going to set my camera right over here and get this party started. Make sure we're in a good spot. Okay. So this technique to me is important because I know that this ombre technique has been around for a little while, but I do see that it needed some transition and growth, and I feel like it's going to stick around. That's what we're being told, is it's sticking around for a little while. So to create this technique, the tools I'll be using, I will be using a Technique board, Redken's color technique board. I have a foiling comb, weaving comb, whatever you want to call it. And I'm using up to 7 lightener with 30 volume developer. I've got obviously a color brush and some clips. I'm using some foil, and then I'm using this wonderful new tool called balayage film. Balayage film, it's an amazing new tool that they've created for us to use. Thank goodness for Amazon too, because I couldn't find the special balayage film here in Oklahoma where I live. Okay, so I'm putting on my gloves and I'm going to go ahead and whisk my lightener with developer. Get that mixed well. So a couple of things that I really like about this technique. Number one, I already talked about. It's going to give you the ability to create softness in the color transition when you're doing an ombre. Because I think, to me, I know when ombre first came out, I started seeing it on television or, you know, magazines, things like that, just some Hollywood people. I wasn't much of a fan. I felt like it was a little harsh most of the time when I saw it. So now this technique gives us an easy and consistent way to create the softness that I think everyone is moving into and wanting to see with that. So with my mannequin, Miss Erica, I have started out, for time's sake on my video, I have started out with a 4-quadrant sectioning. I did the basic in the back, but then in the front I went ahead and did a section here where she's parted toward one side, so she's pushing more of her hair to the other side. So I'm going to go ahead and part it that direction because that's the way she's wearing her hair styled. So in the back is where I'm going to begin. I'm going to release this section. Using my comb, I'm going to slice out about a 1/2 inch thick slice at the thickest point. So obviously when you're on this corner, it's a little thicker on one side than the side than it is in the center for diagonal back section. I'm going to take my clip and get that other hair out of the way. So I'm not much of a braider, so thank goodness that this technique is a very basic braid. So that's what I would need as far as this kind of stuff goes. So I'm going to take my finger and fingers, make a peace sign, and I'm going to section off the hair with those fingers to create just the basic 3-piece braid. I'm going to go ahead and over direct as I braid down from the scalp. And I'm braiding down about 1.5 inches, and that's really up to you in the creativity that you have, the look that you're trying to get with this technique, whatever you and your guests have discussed as far as how far down do you want the light color to begin. So I've braided. I'm going to keep my thumb and finger on the bottom of that braid, and then I'm going to, using my brush and my lightener, I'm going to go in horizontally and brush the lightener onto the tail of the braid. So brushing that down into it, and then after I've got it good in through the tail, then I'm going to turn my brush vertically, and I'm going to brush up toward the braid, but not passing my thumb. That's why I want to keep my thumb right there at the bottom so that I know where to stop with this lightener, because you don't want to get the lightener up into the braid. You want to stop it right, brushing it softly up to it. So then I'm going to take a piece of foil. I'm going to lay that on top of the lightener, on top of the board, softly pressing it down. From there, I'm going to flip it. This is where the waffle part comes in. Flipping my board. And this is the great thing about the Redken board, is that it's you can see through it. So I'm going to be able to see where the top of that braid is and re-grab the top of that braid and release my board. Next, I'm going to reapply on the tail of the braid. Now the reason we need to do the waffle technique is because if we didn't, we wouldn't have a strong saturation. Hopefully you can see that on the film. I can see all of the hair really doesn't have any lightener on it from the first application that I did on the other side. So we've got to get that color and that lightener applied to the underside of that section to get a good saturation of the lightener. And then I'm going to do the same thing, taking my brush vertically and pushing the product up toward the braid, but not touching the braid, not into the braid, making sure I have a strong saturation. And then from here, I will be taking my balayage film and applying it on top. So we could absolutely go in and just cover this with another piece of foil, but what I like about the balayage film is that it leaves it to where it's exposed where you can see it. It's not exposed to the air, so it's going to continue to process the way we want it to, but it is exposed to where we can see it. We don't have to go through and really disrupt what we've done with our foiling, because a lot of times, I know for me personally, if I have to go in and peek into things and look at them, a lot of times I can have some issues with the disruption of the placement that I've already put in there. So I'm going to drop down my section again, using my comb, another diagonal back slice, bring that down, put that up, comb it out, my peace sign, I'm going to put that through there, and then I'm going to do a braid. Now what I do for variation and even more softness is the first time I over direct it toward the face with the braid. Now this time I'm going to do something different. It doesn't have to be the same pattern. I might drop it just straight down, more of a natural fall, or I can pull it even over direct it toward the center back of the head. It's just a matter of preference for you, or just throwing things in that are a little different so that it doesn't create the same lines across the head. Pushing that out, I'm going to take my foiling board, and I'm using my board, I'm actually sticking the board right up to the scalp, and then it gives me a little bit more stability with the board. And then I'm going to place the tail of the braid onto the board, going in with my lightener. Brush is horizontal. I'm a good 1.5 inches or so from my thumb, and then I'm going to turn vertically and softly brush up into or toward the braid, toward my thumb. Next is taking a piece of foil. If you have the board still in your hand, it's always going to be a piece of foil. When I was first learning this technique, I had the tendency, and I still do every once in a while, to accidentally start grabbing the film first, and we don't want to do that. You want to get the foil on first, flipping it like a waffle. That's done. Releasing the board. We can see that we need more saturation, that's why we're doing that waffle. Flip, and then you're going to put the color on the underside of that braid tail. Brushing up toward the braid but not touching the braid. Making sure I have a strong saturation. And next is our balayage film. Wink, wink. Sometimes the film likes to stick to each other. That's where our associates come in handy if we have them. If we don't, it's still very doable by ourselves. And I also like to pull the film with both hands so it's nice and tight. And then it has a tendency to not want to stick around to the things you don't want it to stick to. Continuing up this section, another diagonal back slice. Dropping that down, clipping this up and out of our way. And here I just wanted to show this. So if we really look at this, and we took this whole section and braided it all, I feel like it's a little too much hair, even with our waffling technique, to get a strong saturation. So I'm going to go in and split that in half and just brush one part of it away so it's out of my way. You could clip it if you needed to. For braiding, again, it doesn't have to be the same distance from the scalp. It doesn't have to be the same direction, whether it's natural fall, to the back center, to the front, toward the face. Change it up every time you do a new braid, and then it's going to create even more softness for you, your end result. Applying the lightener to the end of the braid, turning my brush vertically, and then starting to push softly up toward the braid, putting foil on top. flipping the board, grabbing the top, releasing the board, applying the lightener again, and then brushing up toward the braid. And next is my film. Placing that on that section. And then this section's already dropped down. Remember, we've divided this into two. So I want to softly grab that until my cone works well. From here, peace sign, 3-part braid. This time I'm going to go ahead and direct it toward the back center. Grabbing, placing my board up at the scalp. Tail neatly on the board. Brushing through the ends, turning it vertically, softly brushing up toward the braid. Foil on top. Waffles done, flip it over, release. Applying more lightener to the underside, get that saturation, what we need. Brushing up to the braid, and then applying our film. So normally in a class I would be asking my class to tell me the steps that I'm taking as I'm going along, but I can't hear you if you're doing it, so hopefully you are and picking up on this and how I'm teaching it. Now I'm going to, just for time's sake, so you would continue up the head. As you get to the top, obviously that very last section is a smaller section. Just go ahead and continue on. Don't get too thick of a slice in there. So now I'm going to apply it to this front side. Jumping out of my hands. Again, I'm just going to take that diagonal back slice. And around the face, you want to really think about the placement, that where do you want that lightness to start or to begin, and going with that from there. Do you want to start it on this under section? Do I want it to be at cheekbone? If I do, I've got to think about, okay, where do I want to put that? Where do I stop the braid? Because I know wherever I stop the braid, that's where I'm starting the lightener. So I'm going to do my braid. Again, I'm going to over direct toward the face, just a slight braid from the scalp, braiding it out or brushing it out, placing the tail on the board, and applying my lightener to the ends with a good saturation, brushing it up toward the braid vertically, softly. And first up, if the board is still in my hand, I'm definitely going to be grabbing the foil, placing that on top of the board, flipping it, re-grabbing the braid and the foil, releasing that board, and then you can see there we definitely need more lightener to get that saturation to be consistent with our end result. Brushing that into tail of the braid, brushing up toward the face. Sticky little suckers sometimes. Come on loose there. Okay, so on this section, again, diagonal back. Really see that down on top. All right, now it's your turn. So you tell me, what do I do first? What'd you say? Oh yeah, peace sign. Peace sign. Next. Yep, I'm going to get my 3-piece braid. From there, get braid it ever so slightly because of where I want the placement. You and your guest are going to talk about where she wants the placement or where you've agreed. Or she just said do whatever you want and you're being creative and placing it where you like. So next, yep, I'm going to apply my lightener. Horizontal brush. Make sure we have a strong saturation on the side. Brushing up. And the reason I'm doing this with the light hand is that top section, the braid is going to create a little softness, but then this technique is going to also create softness so that we don't have a harsh line where the lightener starts and stops. So from there, what's next? I have the board in my hand, so it is foil. Now what? Yep, we're going to flip that waffle over. What'd you say? Yep, grab the braid. Release that board. Apply lightener. Brushing it up softly toward the braid. Keeping in mind, we want that soft transition right there at the top. Great strong saturation here on the ends. Now what's next? Balayage film or color technique film. We can name it all kinds of things. Placing that across. Now let's see, it's poking her in the eye. I'm going to fold that back and away from her face a little bit just for her comfort. As we get up higher on the head, we're coming up on these sections that could possibly be a little too wide, and we might worry that there's maybe a little too much hair. So I think there are a couple of options here. We can either take a thinner slice and do the full section with the braid. If we're really over directing toward the front, then you're really going to create a little more of a section of the darker or natural or whatever color you've put there. It's going to be right above that ear, so if that's something you prefer, we could definitely do that. Directing toward the face. I feel like in the front, I would always direct toward the face. I mean, I guess you can't say always, but I feel like that's where we definitely want to see more of the lightness moving up higher on the head. So the more you direct it toward the face, the more you're going to get that around the face. So applying our lightener. So we don't want to have a line like that. That's why we're not doing the harsh brush there. We're going to start pushing up softly toward the braid. Next is a foil. Flip that waffle over. Release the Kraken, no, the board. I've never seen that movie. I really don't know which movie it is. I don't know. Lord of the Rings, or is it Harry Potter? I don't know. It's probably a bad thing that I haven't seen either of those series. So again, applying. We don't want to leave harsh lines. Brush up softly. You can hold onto that foil with your thumb, reach it around there and do that. Pushing softly up into the braid, but not in the braid, toward the braid. Now my film is getting a little more stuck together. When you're tearing your balayage film off the roll, don't do what I did, which was kind of press them down on each other, just kind of place them and let them float on top of each other. That would help. So another thing I'm doing is pulling tight with both hands so that I'm getting a good control over that placement on top of the foil. If you don't pull it tight, then it's going to have a tendency to try to go back on itself and stick together, and then it's not the width that you need. So another hot tip on that is to make sure when you're tearing it off the roll that you're making it about the same width as the foils that you're working with. So again, for time's sake, I just want to fast forward. You would continue up the head on that section. I want to fast forward to this section, and I already did the bottom part, but I wanted to talk about here in the front where she does have this side swept fringe section. It's not short there, definitely not a short fringe, but it is something where she's going to have that brushing across her forehead. So really thinking about, okay, how do I create the look? Like, I want to see lightness start closer, higher up here on this section. See where we are. So I want the lightness to start when she sweeps it over. I want to start seeing it higher up, maybe around this eyebrow when it's swept over. So I've got to think about that when I place it. So I'm actually going to take this front braid section and pull it the opposite direction of how she sweeps her bangs or her fringe. Hopefully you can see that. I'm pulling this direction. She's going to wear it that way, this way, but we're going to pull it this way for the direction of the color application. So pulling it over, not going too far down because again, we want to see some of that lightness up around her eyebrow. That's my creativity working right there. That's the look that my guest Erica and I discussed in our consultation. Getting that color applied nice and even. Getting more product if we need it, and then brushing up toward the braid, not into the braid. Don't pass your thumb. Make sure your thumb's at the bottom of it, not the middle of the braid. Next, I'm going to take my foil, placing it on top of that section. Doing my waffle flip. Releasing the board, applying more lightener, making sure I have a great saturation here. You don't want it spotty, or, you know, if we don't get a good saturation, that's where we tend to see more of those, you know, orangey spots where the color just doesn't process correctly. So to make sure of that, and then we're going to softly brush up toward the braid. Into the foil. We don't want anything hanging down. So if you've got those longer lengths, either use longer foil or be able to flip that up without twisty doing it. And we've got our film. Pulling it tightly with my hands. Placing it right on the top of that. Softly. I'm not like having to press into that. Just softly brushing across it with my hand. And then, you know, obviously we don't want to have her sit here, you know, for 30-45 minutes with the foil in her face. So that's another thing about this braid. It gives me the ability to kind of move that up and out of her face without a lot of disruption. So that's another positive thing about this technique. So let me fast forward here a little bit. Through the magic of television, she's ready to go. She's completely finished. And this is the end result of this technique. You can see there's a soft change or transition of color from the top area into where the lightness begins on both sides across her face. I love this technique, and it really happens for me. I can do it pretty quickly. Once you've done it a few times, the ability for speed is really there. So hopefully you love that look that I just showed you and you want to know the formulas I used. So I've got you some formulas written down here. For the first process, which was using the lightener and the braids, we did the 2 scoops of up to 7 with 2 ounces of 30 volume peroxide developer. And then I shampooed that out, and then we did a chemistry system treatment. We did extreme. And then from there, I blow dried it and applied her glaze formula, which was Shades EQ. I used gloss, and I did 1 ounce of the 09NB with 1/2 ounce of 09G. And then I, of course, mixed it equal parts with processing solution, so 1/2 ounces of processing solution. Applied that and let her process for 20 minutes and then shampooed it out. So I hope that you enjoyed the video I put together for you, and I look forward to hearing from you and continuing my journey with this industry and the Redken Company. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Bye-bye.